Welcome everyone to the Montessori Family Alliance Tuesday webinar. So glad to be back after the holidays. I hope you all had wonderful holiday season. I know that I did with family and friends, but I was really glad in a way when it was over so we could get back to our normal routine. I think very much like the children actually. Um, Today I have a great and wonderful guest. She's a colleague of mine, and her name is Terry Sherrill. She's been on before, so some of you may have already seen her before. It's been a little while, but we're catching up, and her topic today is going to be grace and courtesy, building skills for life. Terry is a Montessori teacher. She works with toddlers, I believe, and also works for the Center for Guided Montessori Studies as a program director with that organization. And I think also, Terry, I think you do some school consultation, right?
Yes, I get to do that, and I've been in the classroom, and now I get to go view other classrooms and share some of the tricks of the trade and things that you learn over time. So
Perfect. And I know Terry's helped me out a couple of times when I've gone, Terry, I'm just thinking about this and I need some help. And she has always been there ready with some good information and a good listening ear. So that's always been a wonderful thing. So Terry, I think that we're ready to go for today. So let's get started.
well, I'm first just so glad to talk about this subject. It's foundational to so many other things, and it's also so simple, and yet we often can miss it. So to kind of get started, on our next slide, I want everyone to imagine themselves in a foreign country, and it's completely new, and you don't know the language, and you don't know the customs. And what if you did something and all of a sudden someone started yelling at you, or a group of people started yelling at you, and you really have no idea what they're saying or what they expect for you to be doing. So on the next slide, I talk about this because sometimes it can feel like that this is what happens to children sometime. And I use this slide about jugglers because Dr. Montessori says something about, what if you had found yourself descended into a band of jugglers and nothing made sense and you didn't know what they were doing or saying? That's how things are for our little ones sometimes.
Yeah.
So you might pick up something and it might not look like anything in particular to you, and for a child they might put something in their mouths, or they're just doing what seems natural and to make sense to them, and so how are they supposed to know? So on the next slide we say things like, our children are not born knowing the customs of our time, all the rules, and what they want to know, what they need to learn first is how the world operates. They want to discover the properties of matter. They don't know even things like water is wet, heavy things fall down, any of those kind of things. They don't know that your something that's made out of glass is going to break, or that this is special. So there are just so many things about the world that they don't know, and so it's up to us to help them learn those things in a way that is gentle and specific. So on the next slide, I show that Dr. Montessori realized that children were being scolded for things that they didn't understand. And some people told her when she first started that her ideas about letting children free in a classroom where they got to pick their own learning, was just never going to work, that it would just descend into chaos. And she said, no, what we need to do is specifically teach these lessons of grace and courtesy. And so the grace is about graceful movements, how to control our involuntary movements, how to be careful with things. Children don't know even things how to turn the page in a book, how to push in their chairs, or any of those small things that that just seem so natural to us, that we can break those down into really small steps to help our children know. So that's the grace part. And then the courtesy part is what words to use and how to say things in a way. So we think of it as just manners when it's really so much more than that.
Yeah.
Let's see what else I was going to say. That on the next slide, George Washington, oh, there it is. There's one that we must help, she said, we must help the child to act for themselves, to will for themselves, to think for themselves. And we call those executive functions now, the control of the will, how to have impulse control, regulate our emotions. And that's what we do. I'll read the slide. We must help the child to act for himself, will for himself, think for himself. This is the art of those who aspire to serve the Spirit. So it's keeping the child in mind as a person. And that's why I did that at first, where we imagine ourselves in a place that's far away, or where we don't know how it feels. We just want to be able to empathize with that. And even part of grace and courtesy is learning how to empathize, learning how to have these social graces and why, and to do it as part of daily living skills that, just living, just being with each other and really being with each other. So the next slide is, I love this one. I paraphrase it a little bit more, but George Washington Carver says that life requires a thorough preparation. And he says veneer isn't worth anything. And I think about life requires a thorough preparation, not a shallow veneer. And so what that means to me is that it takes an incredible amount of practice, deep practice and deep learning to learn how to be a human being. Our relationships with each other are very complex. Language is complex. Communication is complex. Even with people I find who are, have PhDs in communication, there's still miscommunications because I might say something and mean one thing, but it can also mean something else. So life is complicated, and it takes practice. So on the next slide, we hear things like character development. I hear about character development skills as if we could just read a story and that the children are supposed to then derive a moral from that story and then be able to put that into practice. Or it's not going to happen because, of course, like we were just saying, they start at needing to know every little thing. So we'll talk to be able to take an abstract idea and then just apply it. I liken it a little bit to maybe watching someone play a violin and tell you about the violin, and then expect you to be able to play the violin from that demonstration, as if there aren't all these other steps about learning the scale and learning where your fingers go and hold the bow. There are so many other things that you would need to know to be able to play the violin, and then plus the practice of daily interactions. So in a traditional model, or sometimes we just think about you know, how to educate, we just miss all of those little steps. And so in a character curriculum, you know, we might jump way ahead, and then wonder why it doesn't work. And that it's, again, just not those ideas of practice. If the teacher or the adult picks who the group is, you know, which children are going to work together, how long, you know, and the child and the adult is making all these decisions for the child. That's not the same as groups forming naturally and disbanding naturally, or learning how to go to someone and ask them for help, or to ask them, can I join, or would you like to come join us, or may I watch you, or may I have a turn now? And not only that part, but the what to do if someone else says no. You know, do we?
That's right.
So we ask, you know, may I have a turn, please? And if someone says no, if it's a grace and courtesy lesson, then we say, oh, then what do we say? Oh, maybe next time, or maybe another time will work. And what a gift that is, to have taught that lesson ahead of time, so that they don't have to worry about rejection or some of those other things, that they just go to the next person and say, would you like to play? Would you like to play? You know, those kind of things.
And again, I think, you know, Terry, it goes back to the whole idea, two ideas. You're calling it practice, and absolutely, we have to do things over and over again. Maria Montessori was famous for saying, you know, repetition is the key to education. And so children will make mistakes. They'll do the same things over again, but as they practice and as the adults in their lives continue to guide them through those things again, they learn it from their experience. And so again, we go back to, it has to be experiential. Your photo of the woman with the violin is a perfect example. I mean, we can stand there with a violin, but if the person that we're talking to never touches the violin, never, you know, has the experience of what that is in their own hands, in their, you know, with their own bodies doing it, then it's not going to sink in, you know.
Exactly. How can you become a virtuoso if you don't get to practice? And
Right.
the only reason I bring these up and have this as an example too, with the Berenstain Bears and things, and nothing against anything else, I just want people to realize how rich that I hear a lot about character building curriculums, and I just want people to know how rich Montessori's ideas were on how to build character. And so I don't know that people always know that grace and courtesy and these character building curriculums are, you know, overlap, that this is Montessori's character building is grace and courtesy, and that ability to learn empathy and to put yourself in other people's place, and just all of these amazing skills. Just navigating around takes skill, to not bump into things, to not bump into other people. Just every second of the day is filled with these opportunities for practice. And so we don't want to sit children in a chair and tell them. We want to create these opportunities where they get to live these ideas in their experience. So just wanted to bring that up. So if you want to do, I think, the next slide, again, it takes an incredible amount of practice to be a human being. And so we need these practices over and over, with how to open and close things, with how to use things. So in Montessori, and then in the home, because parents may not know that, you know, that they can teach these lessons in the home in a way that's similar to the way we do it in the classroom. In my home, and when I visit, you know, with relatives, or if I am helping a friend by, you know, helping to babysit or be with their family or something, I do get out rugs and we can sit and demonstrate some of these lessons. So I wanted to talk about that, something that parents can do in their homes. So we can give lessons. If you want something done a specific way, I have said things like what I would, what I would invite them to come to a lesson. So it can be spontaneous in the moment. That is true. But if, for example, like turning a page in a book,
Right.
that's really one of my absolute favorite lessons. And here, I can, choose a book. I don't know if you can see it. I'll try to hold it up enough. But why would we do this? Because if a child opens things from the bottom of the book, I've seen books and books where there are just rips and tears at the bottom. So, if I'm going to do it for myself, I start at the top, I slide down halfway, and I open the book. And then I'm going to reach up, I'm going to start at the top, slide down, and turn the page in the book. How would a child know to do that if we didn't show them? And I'm using this as an example, but it really can go with anything. That instead of fussing at a child or or being exasperated with something that they're doing, you can say, may I show you a lesson about this? I'd like to show you something. And not only does that model how to do this, but it models how to have these conversations with people without getting into big arguments, and sharing what your needs are, and navigating the world and navigating relationships. So I do have some things that I like to keep in mind when I'm giving these lessons. And there are three things that one is to ask for consent. So one is to invite the child. Even if they're, doing something with something and it's spilling out or something, the words, may I show you something about that? May I tell you something about that? And a lot of times, if you approach the child in a way of collaboration, then they'll say yes. If you're saying, don't do that, stop that, or taking it, then that's, setting up a me against you discipline. But may I show you something about that? And if you do this often enough, then they'll understand it's with that spirit, and they will allow you to do it. And if not, there's other things you could say. Well, I can see you don't want to talk about it, but you're breaking it. So can I show you if you need to go on farther? But most often you can say, may I show you something about that? Or I'd like to have a lesson. Can we get out our rug? And, it would be a small rug like what goes in front of the kitchen sink or a bathroom sink, and have a place to go sit if you want to have a formal lesson. Or so you want to invite them and get that spirit of collaboration. The second thing to remember is to go slowly and break things down into each step, like I showed you with the book, that I'm going to go slowly, turn the page, and open. And then you give the child a chance to practice. There, did you see? And so it's going to be, a time together, a sharing time together. I don't know if anybody's seen, there's a viral video about a father who asks his children to give him a lesson on how to make a peanut butter sandwich. And he's trying to follow it, and it says, put the jam on the bread, and he picks up the jar and he puts it on the bread, and they're like, no, you have to take the lid off first, then you have to get it off. He's like, oh, I didn't know all those steps. So when we're doing it, we have to think through some of the steps, and then go slowly and break it down, remembering that that they're just learning. And then the third thing is to use humor and drama. So right. Not always, but in a lot, don't forget that, being in a Montessori doesn't mean you're serious all the time. I've had children before in the classroom, where I've said, oh, I've noticed we've been bumping into each other. Can I have two children show me about bumping into each other? And they'd bump into their bellies, and we'd laugh. And we'd say, let's try that again, except not bumping into each other. And we're going to say the words, may I pass, please? And so they get this close together, okay, and then say, may I pass, please? And then they walk without bumping. I have one lesson I've taught children, something I know this is frustrating to parents, about teaching children to look at you when you say their name, because that can be frustrating. So I've said things like, you know what, I would like it if when I said your name, you looked at me. So let's practice that. And I'd go, we could do it now. Lorna, I'd say, Lorna, look away, look somewhere else. And when I say your name, will you look back at me? Lorna, Lorna. You did it, you did it. Oh, thank you. That's what I call good looking. You looked in a snap. Let's try again. Can you look away? And I'm going to see how quickly you can do it. Lorna, Lorna. Oh my goodness, you did it again. Thank you so much. Whenever I say your name, will you listen and snap it and a snap and look at me? That's what I call good looking, all right. You're a good looker. So we can teach, we can help them in that way rather than just getting angry and just getting frustrated. So for me, that freed me as a parent. That was a great tool to say that I could have something that I could fall back on and use. So I wanted to share that with other parents. It is New Year's, and so there's a New Year's resolution. So, bringing grace and courtesy into our homes and into our families was something that I want people to know is foundational. It helps our children to navigate the world in their relationships, in building community. I will give you one word of warning, though, is once you've taught a child or shown a child something, then it would be up to us to remember to do that ourselves. So if we've shown them about turning pages in a certain way or walking or setting things down, not everybody knows this, but when we do things in a way that's precise, and I look and I turn, that polarizes a child's attention when we slow down and we show them each piece. So using drama, I said humor, but drama also, that I'm going to put the lid back on and close it. They'll go, what are they doing? So a child wants to see each of those steps, and so using humor and drama can help. And then you can go faster and faster. Just remember to do it yourself also, and then you can be a model, and then it becomes a family. This is the way we do things in our family, and it just becomes part of a joyous celebration rather than something that can be something that gets people in trouble or gets us angry.
I have maybe a helpful hint too, and that is that when you're slowing down and being dramatic about reinforcing how you're doing a particular thing, we need to remember to talk less and do more. Sometimes we talk all the way through a thing, and the child becomes not as focused on the actual doing. Like this little boy that's in the photo that you have here, Terry.
Right.
He's really concentrating on what his hands are doing and how that's happening. And if I do that and talk through the whole thing to him, now I'm going to put this hand over here and that hand over there, and I'm going to lift it from the right side and move it over to the left. That's not going to help this little boy. Right. It's going to be more helpful if I remain pretty much silent and say, okay, now watch really carefully. And so your drama sort of comes either before or at the very end of whatever it is that you're showing the child, so they can really focus in on the activity rather than on what you're saying.
That is such a good point. And exactly, you're almost pantomiming things like an old silent movie. So you can show them the points of interest. I'm going to touch the top corner, you don't have to say, you don't have to say the words. You're just going to help for folding. I'm going to fold it. I'm going to smooth it out. I'm going to fold it the other way. I'm going to smooth it out. So that's what I would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and do it like that, so that they can watch what you're doing and not watch your mouth, or try to listen and do at the same time. So that's great.
And
So
one other little thing that I noticed while I was in the holidays, my 3.5-year-old grandson was with us for a couple of weeks, and he would, if you said something to him, he would say, "What? What?" And I think part of this whole idea of modeling and slowing down is really important, because it reminded me that he's still processing language at 3.5 and will be for a while longer. He's very verbal, very expressive. And I think that sometimes we get tricked by very verbal, very expressive children because we think they understand everything we say and that we can talk as fast as we normally do. And that's not necessarily true. What he's saying is coming from his mind. So he knows what he wants to say and he can say it. But if I'm saying something to him, that's coming out of my mind. And he has to think about the words that I'm saying and what I want, what I'm trying to communicate. And so that's really important too, is for us to slow down our language and allow the child some time to process that language.
right, that's just so true. We say things like, if a child is 3.5, anywhere in that first, plane of development, 0 to 6, and especially 0 to 3 or 0 to 4, that you would say something and then almost count to 5. Can you please get your coat? 3, 4, 5, because that's almost how long it takes to start, for them to process. So sometimes we're like, I said, go get your coat, where they really haven't had time to process that information. I know sometimes my husband will walk up and start talking to me and I'm in the middle of a recipe or something and I'll have missed the whole first, wait, you'll have to start all the way over. I missed that first part. We can say that, but a child cannot. So, so that's another thing to be mindful of. Like you said, give them the time to process it, because it's coming from out of our head. They don't already know that. So it's amazing the different things that you can teach, like or help show them, share. I don't always like to say teach, because we're not, trying to impose information, but rather share information and make it through a day. But like I said, we can help them learn that it's helpful if they look at us when we say their name. We can just a whole long list of, may I pass, please? And wait for the other person, how to open and close doors, how to hold this item or that item, how to carry it, how to push in chairs. So as parents, we can look at the things, if you find yourself wishing they would put their clothes in the basket, in the laundry basket, or if they have these kind of things, then I would just encourage us to stop and maybe have a lesson. It's apart from the emotionally charged thing, and show dramatically and humorously how we would like something to be done in our family, getting their consent and their agreement and things, and act it out. And that way, if there are things on the laundry is on the floor, we can say the words, do you remember that lesson we had about laundry? And then they can go, oh, yes, and go clean it up. Or do you need me to show you that lesson again? No, I remember it. Oh, good. I'll know you remember it when I can see you do it all by yourself. And just how much more of a peaceful home that is, how much, if we think of our child as someone wandering in a foreign land, how much kinder that is than, just fussing. And really, it just makes our life more joyous to be operating that way with our children. And then it gives them a model and success for their future relationships. Definitely, if they're in a Montessori school, it supports what the is happening there, and so that can just be a lot more fun and a good resolution for the new year.
Absolutely. Well, Terry, this has been a wonderful time to learn some things about what we can be doing in our homes that are good for our children, whether they go to Montessori school or not. And especially if they do go to a Montessori school, because it'll be much more in sync and alignment with what's happening in the classroom. So the child will be getting it in both places. And that's a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today, Terry.
Oh, thank you, Lorna, for having me. Like I said, this is one of my favorite subjects. It's just so foundational that we let our children practice all the skills that it takes for them to be successful in life. That's just foundational to give them practice and for us to, to meet them where they are developmentally. So yes, I'm very glad to share it. Thank you.
Great. And thank all of you for joining in today and coming and listening to us.